off if you want to rename yourself or anything like that. We also have captions available. They should already be on, but if they're not, then just click more at the bottom of your screen and press show subtitle. And if you have any other accessibility needs, please just drop Nishma a message. Nishma, I think, is going to wave. Yeah, perfect. And we'll do our best to accommodate for this. My name is Inaya. I am community builder and organizer at the Rights Collective. We are a feminist space for members of the South Asian community, united by our commitment to collective liberation. We have 3 core branches of our work: political education and knowledge building, transforming harm, and community building. And you can find out more about us on our website, Instagram, and Twitter, which I've just posted in the chat. Yeah, we are really excited to have teamed up with Shalimar Books tonight for this book launch. I'll let Anand introduce Shalimar properly in a moment, but just for some context, Shalimar Books is the leading distributor of Indian books in the UK. They are based in Kennington, South London, and they also sell handmade crafts that are sourced directly from India. It's a really beautiful shop, and I would recommend visiting it if you can. And this launch tonight is really a product of Shalimar's relationship with our speakers tonight. And we really just facilitated the organizing of the event. So yeah, I want to thank Anand for connecting us up in this way. I'm going to pass over to Anand now to do a quick introduction of Shalimar Books. Anand, if you want to take it from here.
Hi. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I started importing Indian books in 1968, so it's a long time ago. Mane joined me in the company in 1972, and in 74 we opened a bookshop in Kennington. Now, the 70s really was an extremely interesting decade in that it marked the start of an awareness in the concept of multicultural education, in the recognition of the need for non-English books in libraries. And many teachers, especially in London and Glasgow, were in anti-fascist organizations such as Teachers Against Racism. SOMA was closely associated with the London branch of the National Association for Multicultural Education and was doing book exhibitions in schools on a regular basis. We also traveled around the country. We did exhibitions in Bradford, Glasgow, Edinburgh, and other places. At the end of the 70s, SOMA staged the very first Black Book Fair in this country. They were held in Brixton at the beginning of November in 1979. Less than a fortnight later, we did an exhibition which was to have a major influence on our development. We did an Indian book fair at the Commonwealth Institute. It was an extremely well-attended event, and several months later, we received a surprising invitation to a meeting with the director of the Institute. They were, he told us, intending to greatly expand their shop and were interested in awarding a franchise to SOMA. What followed was about 2 years of totally excruciating negotiations. Eventually, in 1983, Mane became manager of SOMA Books at the Commonwealth Institute, where she stayed for 5 years. For those that don't know about that, the Commonwealth Institute was a showcase for the Commonwealth with stands installed by every Commonwealth country. It came under the auspices of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, with all the bureaucracy that entailed, and it was visited every day by hundreds of school children. So Mane had to somehow cover literature and artifacts where possible from all these countries. She also had sections in the shop on slavery and racism, which didn't go down too well with the directorate there. She also put on events One such, a book launch on the US invasion of Grenada, with Tony Benn as the guest speaker, briefly infuriated them, demanding that Manet put out a statement that this meeting is not endorsed by the Commonwealth Institute. During this time, Manet also started importing craft and textiles from India. When Soma left the Institute, wholesaling and retailing of the craft continued, with Manet supplying museum shops and major trade outlets. In the 1990s, we started importing children's books from the United States, where the publishing of Black literature was so much more advanced than in this country. We were supplying libraries, schools, and other bookshops. And later, we also supplied dual language books to many schools and Shaw Start centers. We also published a couple of titles ourselves in bilingual, in multiple languages. In 2011, Manet, who had been training as a counselor, decided that she wanted to do something else with her life and started work as a therapist. I decided that I wanted to go back to what I had been doing all those years ago and concentrate on Indian books again. By now, Soma was so identified with children's books, I decided to set up a sister concern and started Shalimar Books. We now stock and distribute the leading progressive publishers in India. As well as Yoda, we have Women Unlimited, Free Essays Collective, Tulika Books, Nalayana, Left Word, and others. And I would like to end on a personal note here. I used to go to the World Book Fair in Delhi every year, and our main suppliers at that time were a company called UBS, and their export director was one Sukumar Das. And one year, as soon as I arrived at the UBS stand, Sukumar told me there was somebody I had to meet, and he took me to another hall and proudly introduced me to a young woman who was exhibiting at the book fair for the first time. His daughter, Miss Arpita Das. Maybe Arpita can remind me of the year that was. But it was the start not only of our business relationship, but also of a long and warm friendship. Inaya.
Thank you so much, Anand. Thank you for those beautiful words and that journey. I'm just actually going to link your website in the chat now, if anyone wants to save that. Yeah, so before I pass on to our speakers tonight, I just want to give a little bit of context to this event. So yeah, tonight we are in conversation with the author, publisher, and the activists involved in making this book. If you haven't got a copy yet, I really would highly recommend buying one. I've just linked the websites where you can buy a copy. It's an illustrated account of the Shaheen Bagh sit-in and protest, which started in December 2019 in response to the Citizenship Amendment Act, and specifically where it was sparked by the attack on students at the Jamia Millia Islamia University by the Delhi police against student protesters who were protesting against the act. Yeah, if you don't know, if you're not too aware about what the act entails, it's very basically a fast-track citizenship pathway for illegal immigrants from Hindu, Sikh, Parsi, Buddhist, and Christian backgrounds from Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Bangladesh, who have lived in India without documentation, but it doesn't grant the same for Muslim people. And I think this is especially important to situate within the rise of Islamophobic violence on both a state and individual level across India, and indeed like discrimination that we see in the diaspora and diasporic spaces too. The protest was led by, but not exclusive to, Muslim women whose accounts that we follow through the book. And the protests attracted the attention and the mobility of several different communities, people of all religions, castes, and classes. And there's a really good quote, I think, that kind of sums it up, that it's not just about saving Indian Muslims, it's about saving India. It's from an article in The Print. But yeah, our speakers will go more in depth to this context and reality a bit later on. So for now, I'll just introduce everyone and then pass over. So today we are joined by author of the book, Ita Mehrotra, who is a visual artist, researcher, and educator whose nonfiction graphic narratives and illustrated texts engage with people's movements, rights-based activism, and particular histories, as well as examining modes of representation and visual narrative building. Ita has led community arts projects with various grassroots organizations and rural schools across India, and is currently director of Artreach India, which is a nonprofit that works at the intersections of art, inclusive education, and community development. We have founder of award-winning indie publishing house Yoda Press, Arpita Das, with us, who is based in New Delhi. She's a visiting faculty and senior writing fellow at Ashoka University and a board member of Publish Her, which I will link now. We also have activists and protesters, Atiya Khurshid, who's a principal designer and business associate at Basira Studio, who's also been involved with the creative reinterpretation of Islam-inspired art, architecture, and design in a contemporary context at Minimal Muslim. She completed her graduation in architecture from Jamia Millia Islamia and is a resident of Shaheen Bagh for more than 2 decades. She was a witness to the start of the uprising, also due to her workspace proximity to the actual protest site. And we also have Safura Zargar, who is an activist and student, also of Jamia Millia, and was charged with sedition, conspiracy to cause disaffection against India, UAPA, and other serious charges for her role in the anti-CAA protests. So I'm actually going to pass over now to Arpita, who is going to begin the conversation. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Inaya. Thank you, Rights Collective and Shalimar Books for organizing this and letting us talk about our work and the book, this very, very special book to people across the world, as it were, because there's so many people joining from all over the place. I can see in the chat box there's someone from Brooklyn, someone from Canada, someone from Bangalore, my student, as a matter of fact. And it's really lovely to be here in this sort of transcontinental Zoom event for our book, Shaheen Bagh. Beautifully, beautifully drawn and made by Ita Mehrotra, who's an author we at Yoda Press are very proud to have. I don't really want to spend too much time talking about Yoda Press. I want to really start talking about the book. So maybe just a couple of lines, those of you who would want to place this in context, in some sort of publishing context. Anand said, such lovely things about Shalimar Books. And of course, I grew up admiring Anand's work and hearing about Soma Books, which later became Shalimar Books. And from my father, as he said, my father and he were friends, and my father was also in the book industry. I can't quite remember, Anand, when, which book fair this was, which year this book fair was when we had a stall for the first time. But if I remember correctly, perhaps it was the 2008 book fair. I'm not sure, but I think so. And so Yoda Press came into being in 2004, and it was a very ambitious idea. The idea behind it was to try and build publishing lists, which many other mainstream publishing houses and other small ones as well were not quite focusing on. Mainstream publishing houses were not focusing on some of these lists because they frankly did not care and did not think that these lists had a readership. The smaller publishing houses, because they were focused on other topics which they were publishing on brilliantly. And many of these smaller publishing houses, smaller indie publishing houses in India, have been houses that Yoda Press has learned from and looked up to. One important list of ours was, of course, sexuality and LGBTQ writings, which no one was publishing on really at that point. And that very soon became the list that a lot of people began to identify Yoda Press with. But very soon into our our journey as publishers, we started also publishing a lot on political dissent. And I think after 2014, this particular list has picked up momentum for, I suppose, obvious reasons to most of you. Along the way, graphic books became a genre that we really, really wanted to experiment with. And we started publishing. I think the first graphic book that we brought out was in 2007, and which was this little book. It's actually called A Little Book on Men. And it's this wonderful, edgy book on edgy, satirical look at the the Indian masculinities, or rather Indian masculinity, the North Indian masculinity particularly. And then in 2013, we brought out our next graphic book, which was the first anthology, graphic anthology, the first graphic book really on the Indian partition. And that's when the response to these books, these first few graphic books, really got us excited and made us feel like this was a genre that we want to do much, much more in. When the sit-in at Shaheen Bagh started, and Inaya has given you a very comprehensive sort of, although, I loved the way she was able to kind of very concisely yet comprehensively give you the background to it. And of course, we'll talk much more about that moment. It was sort of an eye-opener for many, many of us who have lived in Delhi, who have known Delhi as our homes forever. And it was a moment when the need to gather in this public space in order to say something that we so vehemently felt, and to listen to those incredibly brave students and women who had come together and made this sitting possible, and to add voice to their voices, and to make sure that we were there as their audience and their support, and any sort of show of solidarity that was possible in that space for as long as it lasted, for as long as it would last, because at that point, one didn't know how long it would last. It became paramount for many, many people in Delhi, more than I would have ever imagined possible. And I've been going for student demonstrations since I was a student. And the numbers that gathered at Shaheen Bagh, I mean, for me, for someone like me who's been part of, demonstrations since, as I was saying, the early 90s, it's unthinkable. It was a miracle. And the second thing was how it was led by women, and it was peopled by women, and it was held up by women. And of course, Muslim women were at the center of it. It was all strengthening, and it made one feel as if there were immense possibilities, even at these fraught times that we live in. And it led, of course, as is now history, to a movement which then spread across the country. And there were many, 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 numerous other Shaheen Baghs that opened up across the country. On one such day in Shaheen Bagh, I met Ita. Ita had contributed earlier to a graphic anthology of ours published at Yoda Press. And I met Ita at Shaheen Bagh. I had heard from someone that Ita had been sketching there. sort of, sketching the women as they speak. And I met Ita there, and I think it was literally like a hug and a show of solidarity for each other and walking past. And I must have said, "Are you doing this? You should do this as a book. I'm going to get in touch." I think it was something as fleeting as that, really. And of course, Ita kept drawing as she was sitting there for the next many weeks. And I went to her Instagram handle at some point and I saw that she had put some of those drawings out. And I was absolutely, mesmerized by them. The power of coming from the site itself and to get into my Instagram account and to go to Ita's handle and to see what I had seen there a few hours ago, transposed there in her drawing. I will never forget the feeling. And Shaheen Bagh was shut down, of course, when COVID hit, by which time it had been going strong longer than we would have ever thought was possible in a city like Delhi, where the Delhi police has been, making its own rules lately, more and more so. And at that point, I got in touch with Ita and I asked her, do you want to do this? Do you still want to do this? Because I really want to do this. And Ita was immediately excited and got to work on it right away, which is the point when Ita and Atiya met. And Atiya is, as a matter of fact, a protagonist in the book. And I think a lot of the conversations and interactions between Ita and Atiya led to many of the incredible pages in the book. And it was a matter of a year, really, making this book. And that's not a joke, because this was painstaking, burning the, just going through nights and nights of work. And I know, having worked with graphic artists, how much commitment it requires to make sure that by the time the first anniversary of Shaheen Bagh comes along, I'm going to have this book ready. And she made sure we had the book to print, exactly on time. And it was absolutely wondrous working with Ita through this whole process. I want to hand it over to her at this point. It's really she and Atiya and Safura who should speak now. And I think, Ita, it would just be amazing if you talk to us before the book to tell us about your own experience of Shaheen Bagh, and then about making the book, of course. So over to you now.
Thanks, Arpita, and thank you also to the Rights Collective and Shalimar Books so much for organizing this and bringing us together, and to everyone who's joined us today. Yeah, so I am going to jump right into a little more about the process. I think this context of the movement itself and how it started at the with the police brutality at the Jamia campus. That's something that you've Inaya and Arpita, you've brought in. So I think this, of course, the protests at Shaheen Bagh were unparalleled in how many people joined in, because it was kind of this. It felt like it was this space for dissent that was so urgently needed for a long time, that was finally there. But what was also right in the beginning, in that first week, I remember like the first few times of being at the protest, when, as Arpita was saying, carrying a sketchbook and drawing. Those first few days was not a very big number at all. It was not the kind of coverage that happened later of, like thousands and thousands on the highway. It was actually a very small group of women sitting there. And I remember the first time going to this, it's on a public highway, which connects Delhi to sort of outside this, on the peripheries of the city, which is kind of the IT hub of the city in Noida. So this large highway is blocked and there's women sitting, a smallish group of 40, 50 women, but speaking very, very articulately about what not just the policies, but what the everyday reality of something like CA would mean. And also not just CA, but also other oppressive structures that have come into play. So there's all these articulations happening, but also there's this sense of intimacy of being able to enter this space of the protest and be able to have conversations with people, who are sitting next to one. So the sense of ownership of women, Muslim women coming out from not just Shaheen Bagh, but also neighboring sites and claiming the space, the public space of a highway, this big, part of thoroughfare of the city. Just upturning that kind of location was visually really, really powerful, from the onset. And at that point, there's no, big media coverage. It's just women kind of on a makeshift stage and also in the crowd. And with them, there's family, there's children, there's the older women also just doing, things, doing life. Life is happening as part of that protest. So there's tea going around, and somebody's got food, and somebody's also knitting and doing other things. It's just this kind of very different sense of what the space and location of protest is, what the culture around it is. And yet there's this really, really powerful kind of clarity of what democracy should be, directions of what governance can be. So it meant kind of just sitting there and taking these visual notes, of course, of what somebody's saying up on stage, but also little conversations happening with somebody sitting next to me. What has your day been like before you came to protest? Where have you, what else has happened in the day? What are the things that happen before and after the site, this coming to the space of protest? So this kind of connections with what the everyday becomes for women is something that is just is something that I feel like can come through with the language of drawing and writing and graphic narrative creation, because there's this kind of layered sense of being able to tell stories. So at that point, it was just also this feeling of wanting to say that this is happening, because there isn't a lot of media sort of enters, I feel, after when there's a turn in things and numbers grow and there's some attention. So in that first week, it was also this kind of onus of wanting to say, a call to action sort of posters. And posters can do that. You come back, there's one sketch and you put it out saying, this is what's happening here. This is women owning space and on the stage. And then, doing that, of course, it grew, and this movement, as we all know, it changed the face of what protest movements and the culture of movements is over the course of many months. Towards a few months in, I also felt like it would be really valuable also to learn from and ask deeper questions and have longer conversations on questions that often go unaddressed even when there's lots and lots of media attention. Questions such as what do we think of as successes of movements? Because it's not just through the course of it, it was clear that it's not just, yes, it's anti-CAA is where it started, and the police violence in Jamia. But when this space of dissent is opened out, this is actually where democracy is happening. And that's becoming clearer and clearer. Even as we speak now, this is where it's no more space that can be taken for granted. This is actually democracy as a verb. You're saying this is how it has to happen, is when there's expression of dissent, and this is a space that's opened up. So if so many dialogues are happening and there are many movements within a movement, then one poster or image or one, often the photo in a newspaper will not really allow for that entering of conversations. And so towards that time, towards a few months in, I was kind of keen to do this, which is also when Arpita was in touch about taking it forward. And sitting and talking with Atya was something that also, with the book, it's not that I need to go in and file a report. I have this bandwidth to be able to, with this sort of project, to be able to say, okay, let's let the conversation allow us to see where it's going. Is it about the history of the space? Is Atiya talking about what happened on a particular day and what she remembers of it? So it kind of moves between these. It moves from particular days of, what happened when the police violence happened. What were you and your family? How did it feel? What was the sense of threat or sense of organizing and saying, no, we need to rise up against this? What does that even mean? How do you communicate? Or is it the history of that space of Shaheen Bagh in Delhi? What is the differences of geography? Because a city like Delhi, there's many senses of history and many histories and many geographies within the city. So the conversations go between these, and I actually want to open out and share a few images while speaking. So I'm just going to do that. Just give me a second. All right. Yeah, so this is kind of, one of these first meetings with Atiya. And for me, it was important to kind of have this visual presencing of the people I'm speaking with and what they're saying, how that conversation evolves, and being able to tell the stories through protagonists, through people that I am meeting with first. So I'm located in the story much less, and for me that was very important. So this is kind of where it begins. Actually, there's a foreword before it, so it's page 15. But it's Atiya saying, and she's here with us, so I'll pass it on to her just after these images. But there's her saying she's grown up here, but never imagined this happening. And also then talking about what the space, the geography of Shaheen Bagh used to be, because it's a dense urban locality now, but it was not so long ago. Actually, fields and open fields, and it's families who've moved in over these 2-3 decades, and it's meant an immense lot for families to be able to own space here. Muslim families coming in from UP and Bihar, and claiming being able to own home in Delhi. And so the changing nature of that space, to also conversations around when protest was happening, what was that like within the home? So for me, this kind of way that graphic language works is really nice, because you can have the layering of what, say, is happening in the background of objective facts of what happened in a particular day. So when the attack happened on Jamia, and students, there's injured students being taken to hospital, but at the same time, what's happening within home? And I remember saying how, when this happened, then her grandmother was saying, we need to order supplies and be able to also make sure that there's, because you don't know what's going to happen next. So be able to have enough in the home. And also thinking that because there's shops downstairs that more people will need things from, so you order it from maybe a shop elsewhere. So there's kind of like the organizing that begins right then, no? At the moment that something has happened, women start organizing various ways of how to deal with what's going on. And it's this kind of organizing of protest that comes in from home onwards. Okay? And then, of course, there's the much, larger gatherings that happened a few weeks into the protest. And within that, still what was palpable was still the sense of intimacy that you could feel while being in this enormous crowd and ocean of people. And it wasn't only women, there was men also very much present. What was amazing was, unlike anywhere else that I've ever experienced in public space in Delhi, men actually towards the back and the sides, and also doing a lot of the giving food, organizing tea. There was a lot of work that was happening with men around the protest side. And yeah, I also remember in one of the conversations, Atya saying that it was very important about how many other communities came in. The Sikhs from Punjab, there was a lot of Sikh women and men actually preparing food on the sides at a certain point, and that this was important for you, having grown up there and working there, to actually have Shaheen Bagh become a place that people not only know, but are coming from near and far in the country, from the northeast, from down from Bangalore to Punjab, or coming to this space. So actually, it would be really nice, Atya, for you if you, I'm going to stop sharing this and come back to it in a bit. But if you would like to come in here and talk about what, growing up in
I
Shaheen Bagh
still
and also
remember
working
that
there.
day very clearly.
Yeah.
I still very much remember that day very clearly. I remember how I was working that day, and I came into office like a little late, around 11. I came around 10 or something like that. Yeah. So I came around 10, and around 10:30 or 11, we started to, like, we could hear, like, it's like if you see across the window, like my office is just on the road, so you can see across and you can see what's happening. So we started to hear noises, and whenever we would hear any, like, noises or anything, we would be like, hearts would be beating. Oh no, I don't know what's going on. Like, it was like those months, even though it was nice, it was fun in a way, you were always scared. There's always this fear, कि पता नहीं, like, what's gonna happen now. So then anyways, and there was a commotion, so we went out. And then we saw there were dholaks, and I'm like, yeah, is this like a wedding procession or something? Oh, and then we started seeing the yellow flags, and I still have that video on my phone. And I saw the turbans, and I'm like, okay. I didn't understand at first. So after they came in, and then I went, like, in the evening, I used to go to the protest site and stuff. So then I found out, oh, at Taj Mahal's, like, there's this group of people who've come from Punjab, the Sikh farmers. And it was surprising to me. Like, I didn't think that any other community would come at such a large scale. And like, they really stayed in for so long. They had their langars, and that was really what democracy meant, like, it really showed that there are a lot of other people, because this area is mostly like Muslim dominated. And that's because people feel comfortable, feel secure. And that was very much true, because I remember when the Delhi riots thing happened, there were rumors one day, कि यहाँ पे, like, something's going on, and everybody was suddenly on the streets with whatever they could find. They locked their homes. All the men were on the roads. And I don't know how the rumor started, but it started in the entire area, and that was very, very scary. So definitely the anti-CAA protest was much more than just anti-CAA. Like, with the whole context, even right now, it means a lot more. And it's really important to have, programs like these to keep the spirit going on.
Yeah, thanks, Satya. I also remember this as a conversation that happened, which wasn't really something I thought of asking, but I remember you saying this repeatedly, of how it isn't just about being able to measure the success and failure of a movement through whether an act is repealed, and how the public's your understanding of what Shaheen Bagh is, and how young people think of their identity has completely changed for you, and that is actually a major success, and something that's shifted by the movement. if you want
True.
to
And
speak to
even
it.
like the conversations around identity started to happen, even in people who weren't who haven't been so formally educated or so on and so forth. They started understanding, how it's necessary to, express our own identity and everything's. There are a lot of layers that come around with these demonstrations. It's just not uh, it's just not the like just the bill that would be repealed or so on and so forth that defines it. There are a lot of things that happen around. There are a lot of people who start to have conversations in their home about how it's not right or how inclusive our country should be and so on and so forth. There are a lot of changing dynamics.
Right. Yeah, thank you. And I think we'll come back to some of that. I'm going to quickly again share my screen with a few images. And then we can soon also open it out to more discussion. So I think what's a few months into it, what was also interesting was how far and wide the protest spread. This understanding that Shaheen Bagh is suddenly not anymore even one place. Shaheen Bagh is now a way of almost the culture of protest, and not just in many places in Delhi, but across the country, and then slowly diaspora. I remember in UK there was many protests at university sites, public spaces. So this actually went on, and even after the lockdown, that was something that really stayed about how this way of understanding what protest is, and the fact that Muslim women organized and led this really long months of protest across the country is not something that can be any more defined by space. And I think that's where also when we were making the book, one of the ways for me to think of what bookmaking, writing, poetry, music, theater, songs around this is now actually ways of extending or locating what the many discussions and dialogues that happen. And so it's not trying to think that this is archive or any way to keep the entire movement within a book at all, but extensions of or ways to re-enter. um, and also, as Atiya was saying about towards the end, there was the genocide. It was actually riots that were completely planned and instigated by police and the powers that be. But there was also within, before the riots, there was a lot of arrests of protesters, a lot of violence that protesters met with. And that happened also across the country. So that there was a sense of wanting to also bring that into the picture. Um, and yeah, and these towards the end, the riots spread through Northeast Delhi, and and I think that's kind of, a lot of what's in the book is also was kind of very much in real time while making and drawing. So towards the end of the book, there's also this feeling that there's, actually there's no sort of conclusion or end to the story, but it's very much part of conversations and what's playing out right now. And in a sense, it's really interesting that things like this, the production of work, can become part of conversations. And this is one image towards the end where, um, uh, it's the they're saying even the farmers' protest today, I feel it continues the dissent by people from last year. And the farmers' protest that happened after a year later, there was actually women saying that, in the farmers' protest, that one of the inspirations is women in Shaheen Bagh. And this we've seen in Delhi, year after year now, there's this nature of taking over public space. And actually, this is where democracy is happening. And this image right in the center is an image of an image of the newspaper article in which it says Safura, an MPhil student of Jamia, has been arrested under the UAPA. And this is something that actually, when the book was starting, also in Atya, as Arpita was saying, there was this spate of arrests, and it's been absolutely, absolutely anti-democratic, to say the least, to see this happen. And I was thinking it would be really nice to hear from you actually at this point, Safura, about what it's meant for you, this the protests after, if you would like to come in at this point.
Yeah, thank you, Atya. First of all, I'm just so glad to be here, to be a part of this conversation and this, I feel this phenomenal moment in history where, I mean, marginal voices are able to find space, as Arpita put it, transnationally. That is it's just this is definitely a beautiful moment for me, and I'm just so glad to be a part of this conversation. Ita has taken us through the book, and I'm sure she will continue to do that. But there are a few things, that I would like to talk about, and I would like to share. When Arpita sent me this book, it is. It was just so nostalgic going through it. It was actually jogging my memory. It was the small details in the book that, I mean, the human mind tends to forget, and especially when there is so much happening all the time around you, and you're just bombarded with all of this information, and you try to remember. I mean, remembrance is in itself a struggle, but then to have it in your hand, and just relax about not forgetting, because this is there. You can just see in your bookshelf, and you can just go anytime and just take it out and just relive that time again. It is often said about books that I mean, about pictures, that they say 1,000 words, but I feel this illustration, this graphic illustration, it makes you feel a million emotions. That is what I went through when I was going through this. And frankly, as a student of Jamia, during I mean, protests were not something that were new in the university, but because of a lack of union in Jamia, so often it does not make headlines, also because it's Muslim Muslim students protesting. It's just not secular enough, so it does not make headlines, but resistance has been happening in Jamia. I mean, I think that is what also this movement did bring out. 100 years of Jamia, and the history is rich with resistance. Jamia is born out of resistance, in fact, the national movement. And it's largely forgotten. You don't see anybody talking about it. It's just sad. But this whole incident, I mean, it was disturbing, it was traumatic, but in the larger scheme of things, if we do see it that way, we see that it reignited the history, the legacy of the university. And as I think, as a Muslim woman, I mean, as belonging to the Muslim community, for me, it was also a reminder that about being unapologetic about your identity, about you also having the right to make space for yourself in the narrative of the country, of India. You also having the right to talk about your rights even as a Muslim, as a Muslim citizen of the country, right? So it made all of those debates possible for us as, as students, as Muslims, as a Muslim women. It also, I think even in Jamia, I mean, Shaheen Bagh, of course, it was a woman-led protest. But even in Jamia, when the first protest started happening, it was the Muslim girls from the hostels and all who actually came out in such huge numbers against against the CAA and started protesting. In fact, it was the first march was from the women's hostel, and then when the boys saw that, I think that they took out a march in solidarity with the women, that we are also going to take out a march. And I mean, in that moment, I still remember that day. It was raining, and it was like the gate number 7 is on my left and gate number 8 of the university is on my right, and we're bang in the middle of the road, and as far as I can see, there are students and students and students. It was so overwhelming, it was so electric, but it was all shattered in the next few days, because the very unexpected happened. In I think all over the world, students are a privileged class, I would say. You do not expect to be treated that way by the state. But I guess we were forgetting that, Jamia Millia Islamia is a minority institution, right? With 50% reservation for Muslim students. So I think the state actually thought that, because there are a large number of Muslim students protesting, they can actually get away with what I with what I call state-sponsored violence inside a central university. That happened. That is what happened in Jamia. So I mean, there is so much that I want to talk about the movement at Jamia and what all happened, but like I want to talk about Shaheen Bagh. I think it was not until the 17th or the 18th that we actually, it came into popular narrative that, women had gone out and, they just sat on the road. The first attempt was not very successful, the women were actually, they were dispersed by the police, but in the night they came back and, they said that, we are going to just sit here, And what I like most about, Atiya's book is, I mean, there are a number of points, first of all, of course, this book is a very powerful narrative. It is also something that was urgently needed. And why it was urgently needed is because, we can see the increasing attempts of the state of, erasing all kinds of struggles of Muslims, of all symbols of Muslimness. We see that in the hijab row, right? When I skimmed through the pages of the book and I saw women, with dupattas around their heads and, such powerful words alongside that in itself, I feel is a resistance, because it breaks so many stereotypes about, what a strong woman is, who a strong woman is and who should she be like, that whole stereotype. It just breaks that, and we can see that, for the future, how significant it is going to be, this imagery that comes out of it. Secondly, I feel that, it reiterates the agency of Muslim women, that the state is, it is frantically trying to take away from us, because in Jamia also we saw that, it was the women in, the stereotype about Muslim women in a burqa is that, she is an agency-less, subjugated, oppressed, forced woman who is just who just has no existence at all, but it was like women standing on the barricades, women in burqas climbing barricades, women in burqas painting on the walls, women with any kind of like having a dupatta, not having a dupatta, like wearing whatever they want to, you know, and just coming out to give powerful messaging. It shattered so many stereotypes in, you know, in those simple but significant moments. You know, there are small details in the book which significant details in the book which highlight the nuances and complexities of the movement, you know, which I mean, there was this when I was seeing these pages, I think it is about 2 pages that are dedicated to this mother who lost her baby when she was protesting. I mean that, you know, these are some of the things that, you know, people will tell you that, you know, be politically correct. Don't include this, you know. It is not good for the larger narrative, you know, these so there is always so much of varnishing happening in terms of, you know, narrativization and documentation also. But the layers, they are so important, and it is it just so honestly and truthfully highlights those layers. I mean, the unlayering of the whole narrative when you go through the entire book, that is, and the truthfulness and the honesty of it, you know, that is something that, you know, I think it's priceless for me. Thirdly, it is also a departure from optical romanticism, you know. It was beautiful. It was beautiful to see women reclaiming spaces, but it was exhausting. It was full of fear. It was so many other things. I mean every time there were people on vigil in Shaheen Bagh. I mean, we sitting at Jamia 3 kilometers away, we were on vigil that, you know, anytime there could be an attack from the state, from the right wing, you know, and lives could be lost, you know. And this was a constant fear. It was a constant fear, and there is so much of trauma that, you know, cannot. I mean, even if there were some days when I would say that, you know, yeah, can we just please get up? Can we just, why wouldn't it end? I mean, I'm being very, very honest. Why shouldn't it be end? Because the protest was not for the sake of protest. The protest is because we want the government to acknowledge our protest. We want them to start a dialogue with us. But that was not happening, right? In the larger scheme of things, when you look back and you see what you have gained from this social movement, that is there. But in that moment, when you're protesting and you expect somebody to just come to you and say that, you know, we recognize and acknowledge your voices, and, you know, we are going to talk with you, and, you know, you do have a right to, you know, in the affairs of the country. That never happened, you know. That never happened, and that was exhausting. That was very, very exhausting. It was a number of times, it was demoralizing also, you know. So that part, you know, is largely kind of missing from the narrative also, and it is good to see it, you know, in pictures, you know. It's and that is the best memory. I mean, that is the best way to keep it alive, you know. So that was something that, you know, I just loved it. You know, reclaiming public spaces, it was, I mean, I would again say it wasn't all romantic and beautiful. It was also exhausting and complex, you know. It was also about learning to navigate politics, and it was also about unlearning, you know. It was about unlearning our inhibitions. It was about unlearning internalized Islamophobia. You know, it was about unlearning biases. It was about embracing our own identities. It was about setting our own terms, and you know, saying harsh truths, and most importantly, accepting harsh truths, you know. Because I feel that the larger resistance among Muslims was also not coming because of this inhibition that, we will be faced with the harsher realities that we do not want to face, you know. So that was an unlearning experience that happened, you know. You know, the entire narrative about how Shaheen Bagh emerged, and you know, how it brought the women in the forefront. It is great that, you know, women, we were able to assert our voices, but it was also about coming in the direct line of attack, you know, and how the state narrative completely changed. It went from saving Muslim women to attacking Muslim women directly, and criminalizing them. And that is what led to, I feel, my arrest also. Uh, uh, Subsequently, when I was arrested, I think the whole institutionalized, systematic attack on my character, on my integrity, or the misogynist trolling that happened was part of the larger narrative of the state to dehumanize and criminalize Muslim women, because we had been able to, build up a strong resistance, against them, and shatter their Islamophobic narratives, of putting the Muslim, of showing as the Muslim community as being very, anti-women, barbaric towards the women, and all of that. So that put us in the direct line of sight, and it was crazy, because there were rumors one day of women taking, money for protesting and all of those, and we really had no idea how to fight that and how to combat that. So all of these things, these are the realities and the complexities that must not be forgotten, because these are also the sacrifices and struggles that that we have battled or fought. So in that sense, I was able to find all of that here and relive it, sort of. Of course, you don't want to relive the trauma, but it is good to see an acknowledgement of your struggle, and you really do want that. I have taken so much time, but this is something that I really, really wanted to put it out there, Ita.
Thank you so much, Sapura. There's so many complexities that you brought into the picture, and also when you're talking, it was when I felt like I'm also, the memories were coming back, rushing back to me. So thank you for doing that and
You
taking
have
the
brought in the complexities, Ita. I'm just trying to locate them.
I know, Inaya, you've messaged me also, and we have some questions at hand. So I'm going to pass back to you, Inaya. Thanks.
Thank you, Ita. Thank you, Sephora, Atya, Apita. Just thank you for sharing. It's really, really valuable to hear firsthand accounts from the protest. And yeah, I think you've already shared some really insightful stuff. And we have quite a few questions in the chat that I want to get to. So we had a few comments actually about language, about the translation. So we had a comment from Nuzat from Toronto, saying, so lovely to be here with all of you. Lovely that you could join us, Nuzat. Who mentions, will the book be translated into Urdu, Hindi, and other Indian languages? And this is also brought up by RDG, whose question I'll get to, but they also ask why the use of English as opposed to Hindi or Urdu, and I guess who is the target audience of the book in that sense.
Yeah, I think Arpita, and it would be nice to hear what Arpita also thinks, because yes, absolutely would like to have it. There was one of my first actually conversations where Arpita was, can we do this also in Hindi? And I very much hope that we can within the book's not very old. It's not been even a year. It's about, less than a year. So I very much see that as a plan. I don't think that can't happen. I do think that with language, if it's Hindi, would be the first translation in my mind. But and that's the thing is that that's again, there's a politics of like language within the country. It's not one language that speaks to the entirety of the country. I remember somebody recently said the first translation should be Malayalam. It'll do very well in Kerala. So there's a lot of translations that I hope happen. While doing the book, just the way that I worked was to record conversations and then transcribe them. Actually, not all the conversations were, most of the conversations that I was having were in English also. So like with Atya, for the first time in her office was conversations in English, and with her colleague. Actually, there was multilingual conversations even within Shaheen Bagh, and the book is gone. People I spoke to, not just Satya, other people in Shaheen Bagh who I spoke to repeatedly have taken the book back. And yes, they also there was this conversation of there would be more people being able to read it, but not that English isn't a spoken language in Shaheen Bagh and Jamia. So yeah, I hope it's translated soon. But Arpita, do you?
Yeah, Ita, you've said it really well. So I'd just be repeating you. There are many translations bubbling under. We've had shows of interest from a Malayalam publisher, also from a Tamil publisher. We're hoping for something to happen with the Hindi edition soon. But of course, these have to be other publishers because Europress is an English language publisher. And but I can't imagine this book not getting translated. But at the same time, you have to remember that we are at a moment in this country right now when publishers are also not, rushing to do this book. Ita and I spoke for hours and hours and hours before we planned the publication of this book. And as a matter of fact, we being in a small independent publisher, I did try to get on board a couple of our regular partners when we were publishing this. And everyone demurred because it is not easy to publish a book like this in the current climate in India. So everybody has that concern. And we realize that for local Indian publishers who are publishing in Indian languages, they are even more vulnerable than all these big time multinational, the big six. If they feel vulnerable publishing a book like this, you can imagine how much more vulnerable a small press like us or local language publishers themselves feel. So everything has its time and its timing, and it'll all happen. But I think the fact that this book came out in a year after the movement and the protest, and for me, this is it really. Safura and Athiya sitting here and giving it that bill of confidence. This, Ita, for me and Ita, I think this is for all of us at Europress, Ita, I think this is the most important thing. Because, you're sort of being told by people who are at the center of the protest that the book says it faithfully and narrates it faithfully. And the other thing I do want to add at the risk of sounding controversial is, of course, what you very politely and quite nicely indicated, which is that why is this immediate, I am astonished at how people often assume that conversations with Muslim women in India would only happen in Urdu or Hindi. And would not be carried out in many other languages. And Shaheen Bagh, please don't forget, it's part of Delhi and South Delhi as well, Southeast Delhi. Right? Safura's smiling, so she knows where I'm coming from. The other thing I want to say is that English is, in that sense, for a book like this, which we wanted to spread like wildfire, if possible, across the country, English was the common factor which was going to make it possible for people in Kerala and people in Tamil Nadu, and people in Assam and people in Manipur and people everywhere else to pick it up, not just outside the country. So it had to come out in English first. And of course, it will come out in local languages later, and I'm hoping in foreign languages too. Anyone interested here? Over to you, Rita.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of important points. But Inaya, over to you. Is there other questions?
Yeah, thank you. I think we will go with this question from Shanika, which I think kind of ties into what we were speaking about. They say, hi all, I wanted to ask about the creation of the book itself and how you chose who to include and feature in it. I guess I'm thinking along the lines of who gets to have their story told and who doesn't, what it means to protest for survival versus show up in solidarity, thinking about religion, but also class, especially in the context of the continued anti-Muslim rhetoric and actions in India today.
That's a very interesting question. I definitely, I think as Arpita was also saying, this conversations, this book happened over a lot of conversations. And I'm really grateful for, everyone who was up for having those conversations, from Arpita and the Yoda team to Atya to other activists. So I think one of the ways that I look at it is that it's organic, for sure, but also that one of the key things for me to make happen in the book was that it's not one perspective. So definitely, of course, it's very clear that this is not the government's perspective. This is the people's perspective. But within that, within a movement, there are many, many conversations. There are so many different sides to it. There's young people who are working in Shaheen Bagh. There's the older, the grandmothers of the protest, the nannies, dadis of the protest. These generations have a different understanding, as it came across from conversations, of what identity, what the history of, say, partition, or even Delhi, New Delhi, and what it means to shape the city. So for me, it meant to be able to have parts and sides of these multiple perspectives within, yes, the first representation of presencing of those who come first in the movement, which for me was very clear. It's Muslim women from Shaheen Bagh and neighboring colonies. For me, that was definite onus, is this is first. And then it was also, yes, as you're saying, there's people coming in from outside who are very much being able to participate in this space because of what women there have created, this democratic space. So in that, what is participation? That became a question. So if, say, a theater person, like this Malika Taneja, who was doing these performances called Zanana Ka Zamana, and that went traveled across sites. So the questions for me would come up as to, why this, and what is it that's making you bring about this theater performance, and as an engagement. And for her, those conversations would play out in a way that it would relate to what it means for that person to enter protest and democratic space. So I remember her saying, I'm coming in from outside of Shaheen Bagh, I'm there, but often you're drinking chai and watching protest and going. So what else can you do as a participant? And so this breaking of, yes, there is people who are organizing, and within that space, there are people coming from outside, but there's so many ways of interaction and conversation that are happening. And it was unlike any protest, the amount of things that happen. There's of course people, but there was the amount of poetry, paintings. There was a whole foot over bridge at Shaheen Bagh that was covered in artwork, and it's the most amazing display of public exhibition art. There's enormous murals came up first at Jamia, by Jamia students, and then also others coming in and painting murals. So these I think the idea was how many of these multiplicities of movements within movements can happen in the conversation of a book. And yeah, I think that's kind of what I like to say.
Did anyone want to add, or should I go on to the next question? We actually have a question for Sephora from RDG. They say, Sephora, who led the protest at Jamia, I ask, as there are no student unions, how did students mobilize? Can you throw some light on this? Was the mobilization incited by the attacks in the library?
As I talked about it when I was talking about it, that there were some sporadic protests happening. The first protest happened on the 11th, that was the Women's March, and the Jamia attack happened on the 15th. Um, their student union is not there. However, there is a lot of organizational politics that does happen, in the university, because of student organizations, like, from across the spectrum, like left, liberal, center, even right. the Muslim right. There are organizations like the Student Islamic Organizations, there is the Muslim Students Federation, the MSF, there is CFI, then there is also NSUI, then there are also some Hindu right-wing organizations. Matlab, this is something that, people are very shocked to hear. But there is so much of diversity, and I feel, as a student activist, I feel that it is very, very necessary to have all spectrums, because that university is the space for dialogue. It is the space for ideation, where ideas are born, and it is the space. I mean, it is the first step into the political arena. I feel the first significant step of our lives, and it shapes us for our entire lives. And if you learn to engage in democratic conversations, build democratic spaces for dialogue, I think that goes a long way. So there is a political space that was created with much. I joined the university in 2016, and before that there was very, very little political space. You couldn't even protest against the bad food in the canteen, or the fee hike, arbitrary fee hike in the university, without getting a show cause notice and a disciplinary committee sitting on you. So I can proudly say that those initial years where we made that political space in the university worked so hard, took so many show cause notices, attended stood test in so many disciplinary committees. I think it's not acknowledged much. Again, it's not something that was talked about much. It was not interesting enough, maybe. So that did happen, but we slowly made that space for ourselves. And since there was the Najib protest, it happened in Jamia students also organized a protest in the Jantar Mantar. Then again, I don't think any, there are so many lynchings that that are happening in India since 2013, and in 2016, 2017, 2018. I remember that there were so many protests. Sadly, it has become so normalized right now, but there was an outrage, and it used to happen in the university also. So that space was slowly, it was created. And I feel the 2019, I feel, was the year in which the political activism in the university was really, I would say, on the brink. There were many protests. There were protests against the sexual harassment of a woman student in the arts faculty, and the students were able to, I mean, there was an inquiry and the HOD was suspended. There were so many wins also, which actually led to the what do I say, because it just fills you with so much of hope and energy. So it was a build up, I would say, of asserting Muslim voices, asserting voice with your identity also. So that conversation about even among the across the left spectrum also, there is very little space for identity politics. But that conversation was happening inside the university since 2018, about the identity assertion and the Islamophobia that was on the rise, which has now kind of become mainstream, and people are openly talking about it. Back then, it was just like, don't talk about this, it is so unsecular, So those conversations were happening. So I think the history of the rise and the creation of the political space in the university, I mean, it's a huge university, more than 25,000 students, is in itself, I think it accords its own, I feel, maybe a book, I don't know, because I'm also a first-hand eyewitness and a participant to that. So I mean, I can talk about it, but yeah, I mean, what actually triggered the widespread, I mean, how it became from a protest to a movement. The transformation happened on the 15th, when the police broke open into the university, brutalized, vandalized, and paraded students as terrorists on the streets. That was when I think the protest transformed into the movement. Yeah.
Thank you, Sephora. I think we have time for just to quickly answer one more question before we wrap up. There's one question from Ali, who says, 2 years later, what has happened to the energy and momentum from the Shaheen Bagh protests? Noted the Kisan, mostly Punjabi protests being successful and with an eye on the current UP elections. So did Shaheen Bagh translate into anything greater afterwards?
Should I answer that? Yeah, so it's often, I'm asked this question often that, what we didn't gain anything. I mean, first of all, the CA and the NRC are still on hold, right? I take it as a win, Secondly, the coming of age of Muslim voices, creation of that political space, the debates around the Islamophobia, the gendered Islamophobia of the state, it has also exposed the state, the Hindutva the state, the project of hate on and to an international audience, I would say, because of that. Also, the Muslim women also inside the community taking lead on issues. I think that is a revolution in itself, Not that it was not happening before, like it was, but now it's intensified. I feel that's just brilliant, I think women are taking the lead now, they are decision makers. I mean, yeah, so that's changed because I have seen it change since I was in 2016. There were very few women activists in the university, Muslim women activists in the university, and I have seen the space increase for me. I have seen the community also become more accepting of me asserting my voice, my identity, my power, talking about my issues, and talking about mainstream political issues, stepping into the public eye, taking that public space. So I have seen that change, that transformation happen inside, the community as well. So these are our biggest, takeaways. And in terms of resistance, see, in the Delhi anti-Muslim pogrom itself, around more than 785 FIRs were filed. Okay, and the majority of these people are Muslims, and we continue to fight court cases. I myself fight 5 court cases. So the battle has gone from the streets to the courtrooms. When I go to court, it feels so, it feels so familiar because I see like women, I see Muslim women really, taking over the court. There are women who, I mean, in one of my cases, there are 26 people are arraigned in an FIR relating to Jafrabad, and around 20 of these are women. I mean, that isn't, and when you see their faces, there is not an iota of worry or fear, and just the way that they were sitting in Shaheen Bagh or the various Shaheen Baghs around the city or around the country, that is the same spirit with which they come to the courtrooms to fight, to resist and, to continue to assert their right to protest. Right. So, yeah, the CAA protest, it is not ended because it was about one bill, one act, but it was about the numerous injustices, the baggage of numerous injustices that we have carried over on our shoulders since so many years, and that has not ended. It has only deepened or sharpened, I will say. It has become more, I mean, the burden has increased, we are carrying more weight now. So, in that sense, the protest, I feel social movements continuously transform, and it is continuously transforming. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sephora. And thank you to all of our speakers. I'm just aware that we have gone a little bit over, but yeah, I just wanted to say a really, really huge thank you for joining us today. I know that this event was really, really insightful for me as well. And it was really valuable to have you all speaking today. Before we close out, I just want to mention 2 events run by South Asian Solidarity Group, who have asked us to mention 2 events that they have coming up. The first is a vigil at the Indian High Commission in Aldwych. And the second is a panel it's called Hijab Ban, Hounding and Hate Speech, which is part of the India on the Brink Preventing Genocide Conference, which I believe Sephora is actually speaking at. So I've linked both of those in the chat there, and I think Nishma will be linking our social medias, yeah, right there. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you found this valuable session. Thank you again to our speakers. Thank you to Shalimar for organizing everything. And if you haven't bought the book yet, go and visit Yoda Press or Shalimar Books and get yourself a copy, because it is truly a great book and a great read. And yeah, that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Inaya. Thanks so much, Rights Collective, for organizing this. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Good night.
everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Congratulations to the